Okay, so it's 11 o'clock and we can start. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Topics in Development Economics module. My name is Alessia Isoppi, and I'll be your course convener, at least for 2/3 of the module, because in the last part, lecture will be taken by a colleague of mine, Lakshmi. You will meet her probably in the next few weeks. And she will be dealing with a different part of the module. Now, as you know, every time we meet, we have to do this. So I'm sure you're now familiar. You have to scan either the QR code or enter the PIN for your attendance. It seems that today we cannot use that part because there are these tables here, so whenever I'll be using the whiteboard, I'll be writing in here. Feel free to move this side later on if you need to see better. So I'll be putting this up again at the break. If that's okay for you, I'll have a break around probably 12 for like 5 minutes, a short break. So we try to finish a little bit earlier, okay? Around lunchtime if you have other things. Hopefully that will be possible every time. So what I would like to do in this module is to provide you with an idea of what is the latest trend in development economics now. Now, if you were to do this module somewhere else, probably there will be somebody with a different view, and that thinks that there are different topics, different topic choice that they would like to teach you. For me, at the moment, and this has been going on for a few years, the most important point of view that I would like you to see. Okay, I might just stop, okay? So the most important topic that I would like you to, I would say probably is a length through which I would like you to see some topics through, is the asymmetry information. And in particular to see what kind of impact those asymmetries can have specifically in developing countries. Now, why do I think that this is important? I think I will have the chance to explain you a little bit later on. In terms of method, what we're going to do, we're going to use both theory and empirics. So there will be some, especially at the beginning of the module, and I really say that there will be a lot of intense maths and micro applied. So those of you that are not familiar, be aware of this part. You might find it not extremely interesting, but what I usually say is an advice, just bear with me, because it's like a necessary pain that we have to go through in order to appreciate some more complicated things later on. So the first couple of weeks will be mainly devoted to study some theoretical models with missing or incomplete markets. Why do I think that is important? Because this is how eventually those markets shape the institution. And at the moment, if you ask me, I mean, it's not just my opinion, but there's a great consensus in the development economics world, that one of the greatest issues, one of the greatest problems why some countries grow better, faster than others is not really associated to the endowment of labor or capital that they have, but it has to do with the type of institution, so the way in which these factors are actually organized. So I will discuss mainly ideas of others. Probably if we have the chance, I'd like to talk to you about maybe one work of mine that I'm actually about to finish, to complete. Not because I think it's extremely important for you guys, but just to give you a sort of update on research about people that work in this sort of field too. The majority of these ideas, as I said, are not mine. Most of the time will not be cited properly. If you spot any issue, any typos, any mistakes, just please let me know, and I'll be very happy to change them. So what's the plan for the lectures that will be together? We will probably focus on 3 topics. 2 topics per, well, one topic will take 2 lectures, pretty much. As I said to you in the first 2 lectures, which means today and next week, we will do an introduction of basic contract theory modeling, mainly moral hazard and adverse selection, 1 period. And then we will look at some application. The most important application that we will consider is the sharecropping model. As I said to you, this is kind of necessary pain to go through the second topic, which is the land market and property rights. The majority of the country that we were talking about, mainly focused on Africa, are countries that rely heavily on agriculture. Now, agriculture is based on land and land market and property rights. And one of the things that struck me when I first went to for example, to Africa, to Nigeria, was to find out that there's no land market. So land is not a thing that you trade. It's not something that you can buy or sell easily. Why? Because it's associated with a lot of other issues that tied into social norms, identity, inheritance, belonging to a specific ethnic group, and therefore it's not something that you easily trade. Now, if you think about straight away, that has huge implication in terms of how you organize production, okay? So, and therefore also how to organize property rights, because the way in which property rights are organized, and this is why we need the theory behind to understand really well what's the issue behind, property rights determine incentives. And incentives, as we will see mainly with the empirical paper that we will look at, eventually have a huge impact on productivity. So whether the land is yours or you are renting in and the owner is somebody else, has huge impact on how much this land can provide in terms of outcome. And this is something I think hugely important to study. Once we have seen all the micro aspects associated to land market and property rights, we will move to see how this eventually, at the micro level, can have an impact on growth. And so we move from the micro point of view to the macro point of view. And as I already said to you at the very beginning, we're going to see some theories about why some countries grow faster than others. The focus will be on institution and in particular on Africa. If we have time, and I really would like to do that, I'd like you to see like a preliminary version of the book that this guy, professor at University of Chicago is writing, and has to do with institution, Africa, and in particular what can we learn from the Africa's journey towards development. Less pleasant things. on the 22nd of October, we will do the midterm test. So the midterm will be online, but timed. And the time will be an hour and a half. It will be during lecture time, so it will open at 11, and it will go on until 12:30. You can take it wherever you want, okay? From home, from here, wherever you like. I think this room should be free. The structure of the midterm will have 2 questions. It will be an open essay question, and you will have to pick one. And then it will be 2 problems to solve, and you can choose one. So overall, if you were to do this test on campus, I would have given you 1 hour, okay? So overall, you have 1 hour and a half just to take into account. There might be some connection issues, there might be some problems uploading the file and anything. So you should be pretty covered by that. Now, I'll tell you more about this, but just for you to know, because there will be problems to solve and maths to write, I'm very happy for you to do that handwrite. So to do with the handwriting, take a picture and upload that in the Word document. Okay, so I don't want you to waste time in some sense in typing equation. That I don't care. If you know by now already that you will have issues on that day for whatever reason, please email me or come and talk to me at the end of this lecture, okay? Because I will ask you to submit some forms, because unfortunately we cannot change the date and that cannot be retaken. The main exam will be exactly of the same format, so if you do the midterm test, you will have already a very good idea of how the final exam will be. I don't know when that will be, because we don't get to have any say on this, but again, will be online and timed. The only difference is that rather than having 1 question to discuss, you will have to pick 2 out of 4. And with the problem, you still will have 2, and you will have to pick 1. Any question on this so far? Yes.
Sorry, are we right to assume that the questions are split up by topic?
No. That's a very good question, actually. No, so I would have said they're probably closer to the time. The guessing game with topics and questions for this module doesn't work. And not because I want to be mean, but it's just because as you will see, there will be a lot of comparison that we will make across topics. As I said to you at the very beginning, there will be some technical stuff we will go through. So there will be a back and forth continuous. And so for that reason, I can't really do that. Maybe something that you know already, but is worth repeating, is that the midterm test accounts for the 30% of the final grade. So the 70% will be the final exam. Any other question? There was another question here. No? All good? Great. In terms of the course material, what do we have? So this is the outcome of several iterations. I try to change topics every year, or at least include something different. That's the first part. I don't have much flexibility because it's more the technical stuff. But then later on, I try to include stuff that changes every time. So apparently during COVID, students really benefited from having some videos of the most technical part. Why? Because sometimes I might go fast during the lecture in the writing, and so some steps get missed. And I've been very happy to keep them on ever since. Why? Because that gives me more flexibility. I'd rather talk to you and discuss the outcomes and the implication of the model rather than copying an entire page of notes on the whiteboard. So for this more kind of technical part, you will have the videos mostly. There will be readings, but for the readings, I will post them each week in your week folder for the material, so we will know exactly what paper I am about to discuss in more detail. For them, I will tell you more when we get there exactly what I want you to read. Can I just ask how many of you have taken any econometrics module or are taking it now or have done it in the past? Can you raise your hands, please? Okay, that's really good. So I think this year we can stretch a little bit further. But don't worry for those of you that don't have or have not done any econometrics, because I'll tell you exactly what parts of the paper to read or to focus depending on your abilities. And then we will have the lecture time. So every Tuesday lecture will be in person. And what can we do together? We will do different things. So we will do some extra material. I would like you to see the sharecropping model in many different forms. Why? Because I would like you to eventually understand, first of all, how important that is. And for example, if I ask you during the midterm or in the final exam, why don't you talk about the sharecropping model and discuss the implication for productivity? At that point, it will be completely up to you which module you would like to choose. Okay? So in that sense, it's true that I don't link the topics to the question, but I leave you, in some sense, some freedom in terms of what kind of topics and arguments to bring when you discuss the question, both in the midterm and in the final exam. We will do some Q&A, so feel free to post some questions and then we can discuss it here, or I will post you some questions and we try to answer them together. I will also provide you with feedback on the essay part, and I'll move that in a minute because we will discuss that when we talk about the group work. And then we will do also some Sunday lectures. So especially in the second part of the module, which is the one that I try to change mostly every year, there will be some new papers or some different topics that we can do together. And for that reason, we will have like a normal lectures. Now, one of the things that I introduced a few years back now is becoming more and more complicated because numbers in this module are going up, is this voluntary group work. So if you want, this is not mandatory, so whatever grade you get, it will not be part of the final assessment or your final grade in any possible way, so it's totally for you. But I consider it a very good practice both for the midterm and the final exam, because the first part of the questions, it will be to discuss a statement, it will be to discuss, to comment and provide a sort of discussion using what you've learned so far. Now, you can do that self-selecting yourself. I posted already a link to a Google form on our Blackboard page, so you can just enter your name. Groups are a maximum of 5, and you self-select which people, friends, mates you want to be with. And you can just rather submit that work every week or every 2 weeks. Why do I give you this chance? Because I know that you're very busy. I know that you've got other modules going on, other tests and stuff, so I don't want you to feel the stress about, oh my God, I have to do every week. And also because it requires some kind of coordination with other people, so sometimes it might not be possible every week. So it's totally up to you whether you would do it every week or every other week. Each week I'll post 1 or 2 essay questions based on the lecture material, and I'll give you as a format for you to answer in no more than 2 pages, which is exactly the same format that you will get in the midterm and in the final exam. I will provide a general feedback by group, so I will usually write a statement or like a sentence, a paragraph at the end, and I'll send it back to the group. Then if you want to, like a general feedback, if you want to talk more, or if you want to learn more about the feedback that I gave you were not quite sure about, you're very welcome to come to office hour, or if we have time, I'd rather have like a session where we comment a statement all together here in class during one of our lecture. Any question? Sure? Everything clear so far? One thing I haven't said yet, we start tutorials next week. So the first tutorial will be on the 11th of October. I've got many of you emailing me about, I cannot take this tutorial, can I move to another one? So what I'll do today, I'll post the times for the tutorials and the rooms. And until last year, it would have been very easy for you to hop in and out depending on, there's a room capacity, but if it's like one or two, it's not a big deal if you want to do a one or the other. From this year, there's a problem because of the seat app, because basically you have to register in the tutorial you are supposed to be in. So if you know that you have any issue, you cannot attend the tutorial, you've been signed up, please email the source attendants, because they will be the one that eventually will have to change the schedule in which you are registered. Otherwise, we cannot do that. Okay. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. The only thing for me is exactly the same. It's just that for you guys, will not eventually able to register your attendance. And especially for students on visa, that might be an issue. Okay, so I'm very happy if you want to swap. You don't even have to tell me. Make sure that you warn the people that can enroll you so that you can get the right code. Now, so let's now start trying to understand a little bit more what this module will be about. As I anticipated at the beginning, one of the biggest challenges that we will face is basically to establish a causal mechanism that will eventually allow you to explain why some countries grow faster or better than the numbers. Now, if you would have asked me or any development economist that question, I don't know, probably in the 70s, they will assure you, well, the problem is, if you think about a generic production function, the problem of why some countries do not grow is actually due to the lack of capital. So, especially in the 70s, between 70s and 80s, there was this idea that developing countries were lacking physical capital. And this is what has driven most of the cooperation policies, challenging and fueling foreign aid towards these countries for at least 20, 25 years. Then in the 90s, thanks to the technology, data availability, people started to evaluate this massive influx of capital, and they were about to say, well, actually, there hasn't been much growth despite all the capital that has been channeled in this country. And people started to reconsider and say, well, yeah, actually it's not the capital, but it's the labor input, the problem. Labor intended as health, quite recently, or more in a standard way, education. It's true that maybe some of these countries were lacking capital, but the biggest problem, the biggest challenge of these developing countries is the lack of education among the population. So even if endowed with capital, people will not know how to best use it. So what do we need to do? we need to massively start educating and channeling and promoting education programs. Primary, secondary education. And this has been the focus from the 90s up to 2000s, I would say. Again, another evaluation around the beginning of 2000, which is like almost 25 years ago now. People realized that again, why output growth, whatever you want to call it, was not really growing too much, despite all the investment here and there. And this is where economists started to change focus. And actually think that the problem was not neither K or L in a standard production function, but it's actually the F. What is the F? Is the way in which you combine both capital and labor. And if we have to pick like a proxy for this F, if we want to quantify this F, probably the best way to do this, it will be to proxy with the type of institution. Are we talking about democracy? Are we talking about a country where a dictatorship, a country where there's a military regime, a country where social norms actually rule the country despite the rule of law? How is the rule of law organized? How is the system, the court system? How is the enforcement mechanism? And so people in the probably last 20 years changed focus and now look at the way in which these factors are organized. So before, in terms of ideas and hypotheses, the classical view used to assume, as you can read, that the institutions were the same across any economies. Perfect, there was no friction, no entry barriers, perfect competition, and secure property rights, which will be basic. In our module, the key assumption that we will be studying. But the only problem is that the developing countries are very far from all this assumption that you can read. So there are lots of entry barriers, and in particular, property rights are organized in a way which are very far from secure. Sometimes they cannot be traded, sometimes they cannot be exchanged, sometimes property rights are associated to the identity of the owner. And not in many countries, people, when it's born, get registered. So by definition, you might have a title that you cannot link or associate to a physical person. So what we will be focusing on, it's all the things that we mentioned so far, and in particular, market and government failure, and the way in which we will be looking at those is via the lens of asymmetric information. One of the elements that characterize interaction, relationship across agents is the fact that whenever you enter in a trade or an economic relationship, you might not have, both of you, the access to the same type of information. Now, information is key in that sense because it's going to change, and I'll show you how. It's going to change the incentives, which means the behavior of people. And this is what we will be focusing on. Now, as I said to you at the beginning, we will be focusing both on theory and empirical aspect. Why? This is a very personal view. I think that the theory without any empirics is a pointless conjecture. I might come up with a very interesting theoretical module, but if the assumption that I work with are very far from reality, what do I do with that? What kind of suggestion, what kind of insight can I get in reality? Remember, and this is something that I would like to teach you as well, or to show you another application, is that whenever we work in a theoretical framework, it's crucial to understand what are the assumptions under which we work, because these are the ones that define the environment. And most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, the outcome that you will get is a direct consequence of the assumption that you made. Empirics without theory is just a mere description. You may observe a phenomenon, but what we want to do is establish a causal relationship to make sure that this X is what is actually causing Y. Now, the problem is that most of the time in economics, there are many X's. And so we want to be able to isolate which one of those are affecting and determining that particular Y. This is the issue that econometrics tries to solve. So we will look at the theory, because in this way we will be able to identify out of many which are the key elements we want to understand, we want to focus on. And then eventually we'll look at the empirics to be able to quantify what's the impact of a particular X on Y. You can say that all of them impact Y, but then you will be able to say also, yes, but this is much more important than that. Okay? And these are all elements that we will discuss together. Any questions so far? Okay, so why don't we stop now for 5 minutes, and then we start with a little bit of modeling later on, okay? So that we can go without interruption. I'll be here if you need any question, if you have any questions. Yeah, I was about to do that, yeah.
Basically, I'm still not in this class because I decided to change it to advanced econometrics and it's just not what I was expecting. So I won't be able to participate.
Okay.
Is that like a problem? I don't really understand why.
So there are two differences. One is
I'm not really
the other is some of this, yes, I think the majority of that. So, with the podcast, yeah, it's got a problem. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does it work? Does it work? Yeah. Okay. So the framework that we will be using a lot during this module comes from the contract theory. Has any one of you done that already? Micro 4, maybe? Yeah? Good. So the notation we might be using is slightly different, but that it's should be not a problem at all. So, as I said to you before, in an ideal world, we will be looking at a large number of participants in every market, no public goods, no externalities, no natural monopolies, and no information asymmetries. And on top of that, a benevolent court system able to enforce every contract. Now, when you hear the word contract, you just have to think about any agreement with an economic meaning between two or more parties. Now, as we said already, development economies are very far from this. There's no monitoring, or can be very complicated. There might be pure information. There might be difficulties in checking and eventually verifying information. And for that reason, the only thing that can work whenever you establish a relationship, it will be to use high-powered incentive schemes. Do you know what does that mean? Those of you that have done this model, that have seen this model before, should be familiar. Any idea? Yeah?
Is it so that they don't break contract? Is something there in place so that parties stay within the boundary of the contract?
So this could be one way. There are many different ways according to which you can set up, and we will see that, incentive schemes such that breaking a contract or deviating from a behavior will have consequences, and we will discuss that. But specifically, high-power incentives focus on the incentive of the individual. So I want to make it really worth for you to exert a specific action. The model that we will be working with is a principal-agent static model in a moral hazard environment. So we won't be looking at dynamic modeling. We might discuss some of the implications, especially when we do the tutorial, but we will keep it very simple. And the other model that I would like you to see and to study is the principal-agent model with the adverse selection. Can you tell me the difference between these two types of asymmetries? What's a moral hazard and what's an adverse selection type of asymmetry? So in the case of moral hazard, remember that we are under the umbrella of asymmetric information. So in any of these two contexts, there will be some information missing. Depending on what's missing, we can characterize the different type of asymmetry. In the case of moral hazard, what is it that is hidden? Sorry, say it again. Yes, please. Can you tell me a bit more about this? It's not verified. Correct. Very good. So basically, in the case of moral hazard, what's hidden is the action. You're going to do something, and what I'll be able to verify will be only the outcome. But I won't be able to track exactly the amount of effort that you have exerted. And we will see in a minute, because there will be another component. Now, in the case of adverse selection instead, the type of information which is hidden is the information about the agent. What does that mean? Think about I want to hire somebody, so hiring process. I got two CVs, and I'm going to look at the CVs and decide on the basis of the CVs which candidate I'm going to hire. Now, the problem is that we will say that the CV is an imperfect signal of the quality of the candidate. Why? Because we can say on paper it's got lots of qualifications, but I won't really be able to tell how good this guy is until I can actually test it and try. Okay? So we will say that the CV is an imperfect signal of the quality. Because from the outside, and we will say ex ante, we can't really tell who's the best candidate. We have some kind of information only. Now, to characterize the environment, the scene in which we operate, a principal agent model with moral hazard has to be defined, a model has a model, has to have some ingredients, okay? Think about you have to bake a cake. In order to be classified as an apple tart, has to have some apple. That's exactly the same thing. Missing one of those, you won't be able to classify it as a principal agent model. So first of all, we can have two agents, two players. Eventually, we can have more, but not for this module. And the relationship between the principal and the agent has to have some feature. So first of all, the principal P asks the agent A to perform a task on the behalf of P. So I would like somebody to come and, I don't know, paint my room with a different color. The action of one player, A, affects the well-being of the other player, P, and we will see in what way. So the crucial aspect is that there is a direct relationship between my action as an A and the well-being of P. This action determines usually, stochastically, some performance measure. What does that mean?
Like random.
Try
Like
again.
you don't know. Like I mean, many variables.
What does the word stochastic mean? Let's be precise. Learning this is like learning a new language, right? So you're not said wrong things, it's just not to the point. Okay? What does stochastic mean, guys? What's the opposite of stochastic? Yeah.
Is it perfect distribution? If like the opposite. Like everything is constantly distributed.
But if I tell you that, so is this world stochastic or what's the opposite of stochastic? Deterministic, thank you. So if it's not, does that help in some way? Understanding? You were close. So stochastic means that whatever outcome you get will appear, will happen with some probability. It's not for sure. In a deterministic world, things happen for sure. Okay? In a stochastic world, things happen with some degree of probability. And if you're lucky enough, you will know the distribution of this probability, like your friend just said. So you might know that, for example, this outcome is going to happen with a uniform distribution. What does that mean? What's the feature of the uniform distribution? That things happen with the same probability. Okay? So if I have like 3 outcomes, each and every one of them will appear with the same probability. That's a uniform distribution. There might be the normal distribution. So depending on the type of distribution, you might be able to think what outcome is going to be more or less likely. Okay? But the crucial thing is that the outcome produced by the agent is influenced both by effort, and we will get in a minute to this notation, but also theta. And this is the stochastic component. What does that mean? The stochastic component can be identified as luck. Okay? I'll make you an example that you understand straight away. You can study one topic for the midterm exam, and then the midterm exam is exactly that one question that you study on the topic, the only topic that you studied, and you're going to get a very high grade. Okay? So this, not much, this really high. Okay? You've been very lucky. The opposite case, you might be studying everything, but eventually you get only one question on the topic and you revise less. So you put a very high effort, but then eventually, because of luck, bad luck in that case, you will get a bad grade. Okay? Now, as a principal, I can only observe a P, Y, whatever outcome, Q, whatever you want to call it. But I won't be able to disentangle whether you work a lot or you've been very lucky. And this is the problem of asymmetries on information. As a principal, I can only observe the outcome. But what I know is that this outcome is being generated by the interaction of these two terms, luck and effort. The other crucial thing, that in order to have and to be able to characterize this relationship as a principal relation 1, the interest of P and A must diverge. And we will see when we get to the function in a minute how that is easier to understand. But in terms of intuition, the idea is that whatever makes P happy causes to A a disutility. At the same time, whatever makes A happy causes to P a cost, a disutility. Okay? So there is a conflict or divergence of interest. Now, I'm sure you've heard, if you've been especially in a micro module before, many examples from the game theory about, I don't know, the prisoner's dilemma, the battle of sexes, or I don't know what else, whether these two guys want to serve or keep going, and who eventually is going to serve first. Now, there, also you have a strategic behavior in the terms of the battle of sexes. If you're not familiar with the example, it's a choice between husband and wife, whether they want to go to the football match or the cinema. Who's going to win in that sense? Together to the cinema, together to the football match. What's the difference between the strategic behavior that you have in a game theoretical approach compared to that? Any difference that you can spot straight away? Are you familiar with the example that I mentioned to you guys? Do you remember the prisoner's dilemma? Probably that's even more famous. What's the difference between what I'm telling you and what you know? Try. Yeah?
Timeline. So in the prisoner's dilemma, they do the action at the same time, is one after the other.
That's a very good point. So the timeline, it might be the exact example that we are discussing, but actually you might have many of the game theoretical approach that can be made sequential. And in that will mimic a lot more the timeline that we will see here in a minute. So time has it will have a huge impact, and we will see that in a minute. But I wouldn't call it like the most important difference between those examples of theoretical, game theoretical approach, strategic games, and this. But it's a very important point. Somebody else. Look at point, yeah?
Is it in game theory, you don't know what the other person's doing, whereas obviously a husband and wife, like they know what each other is doing?
though there might be some prior communication, it can be classified as cheap talk, so not something that eventually is going to influence the relationship. Go ahead.
So maybe in prisoner's dilemma, both of them like lose. They end up on the worst outcome. And here, one of them is happy and one of them is unhappy. And in prisoner's dilemma, they're both unhappy. They choose the worst situation. They both lose.
So there is an element of loss in any dimension, but that's true even here. Okay. Try to think more about point A. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, with the last point, it says, like, that it's impacted by events that cannot be controlled, but with prisoners dilemma, like, it is just about the imperfect information of, like, trying to predict what the other person would do. But it's not, like, really impacted on, like, external things, because it is just, like, direct interaction between the two people's decisions.
True. I would say that there might be some other game theoretical approach that you can maybe make more like this, and you can eventually insert a stochastic component in that sense, stochastic games. Okay? The relationship, the reason why I wanted to focus more on point A, first of all, you all said things that are extremely important, and we will go through all of them slowly. But the one I would like you to think and remember straight away has to deal with bargaining power. So if in a game theoretical approach, both players have the same bargaining power, so there's no dominant position, in a principal agent model problem, and we will see many applications of those, the key feature is that the principal has all the bargaining power compared to the agent. I'm the one hiring, I'm the one making the screen, I'm the one that would like A to perform a task on my behalf. You might be or might not be familiar, but this theory that we are working with is a Nobel Prize material. This is something that both Jean Tirole and Jean-Jacques Lafont made, and also has been taken and then over by other in different and many applications. But the key one, the textbook application of this, is the relationship between employer and employee, where it's very clear who has all the bargaining power and who has less bargaining power. Okay? So there is somebody that's going to decide the condition, and what the agent can do, and we will see that in a minute, as options, it can only accept or reject, but it cannot change the conditions. Okay? So this is another important feature of this, this relationship. We said about the hidden action, so P does not directly observe this action, can only observe the final outcome. And so, as we said already, the final outcome depends on events, luck, theta, that cannot be controlled, neither by P or by A. As we already anticipated, both players agree ex ante. Do you know what ex ante means? It means before. Okay? So we agree before to a reward schedule. If you succeed, you will be paid 100. If you do a bad job, you will be paid 20 or 0. And this is very clear from the very beginning. As I said to you, because of the difference in bargaining power, the agent cannot renegotiate. Renegotiating a contract from a theoretical point of view is extremely complicated. We will not look into that, but I just want you to know that it's possible. Okay? But not in this world that we are discussing. And the key and final information is that the reward schedule is a function of the performance variable. What does that mean? It means that if I will have to pay a transfer, T. That is going to be a function of Q, outcome. And what's going to happen is that if we assume that Q can have two values, Q upper bar and Q lower bar, to keep it simple, T upper bar will appear when Q upper bar comes, and T lower bar will be paid if Q lower bar verifies. Okay? The only way that the principal has to modify and eventually induce incentive, we will see that how does that become crucial, especially without information, when information is incomplete, is via this. The crucial aspect is that I have to make, as a principal, in the best interest of the agent, to exert the high level of effort. You're not doing it for me. You're doing it for yourself. Why? Because you're going to be paid. And that's the only way in which you can transfer the responsibility of the action from the principal to the agent. Now, if you are ready, we're going to do a bit more formal what we have said so far, which was mainly the intuition. Is there any question on this? Okay, so we said about P and A. Now, for this lecture and the next lecture, what I really suggest you guys do, I've posted chapter 4 of the book, The Theory of Incentives. And this is all I need you to know about this, okay? We will go through the notes, but if you want a little bit more details between every step, the book is the best thing that you can actually read. Now, in the book, one of the conventional way of writing is that the principal is always a she, okay? And the agent is always a he. So whenever you will read, you will see that she, the principal, orders the agent to do something. Now, the level of effort which is exerted by the agent can range between 0 and 1. So, in a much more complicated version, we can have a continuum of effort, a continuum of outcomes, a continuum of a work schedule, but eventually the intuition doesn't change. So for now, we just keep it simple. Effort can be either 0 or 1, and associated to the effort, as we said before, there's a cost. The cost is specified by the parameter psi, function psi, and the function is going to be equal to 0 when effort is equal to 0, and equal to a constant psi when the effort is equal to 1. As we said before, there's a transfer, which is the payment that the principal is going to give to the agent. And the utility function of the agent is going to be given by u of t minus psi of e. What can you spot straight away in the utility function of the agent? So now what we're doing we're simply putting in equations all the sentences, all the statements that we have said so far, all the intuition that we have said so far. Why? Because this equation is a sentence, is a statement, okay? So I would like you to learn to read equations. I'm sure you're very good by now. So what can I say about this equation here? Yes.
The utility of the agent, like positive that you get is the wage, whereas the negative is the effort gets put into get the wage.
Very good. So we can say that utility of the agent is increasing in the transfer. The more I get paid, the happier I am. But it's affected negatively because I've got the minus in front by the cost of effort. So the more you ask me to work, and the more I'll be unhappy. Okay? The production is going to be labeled by Q, and Q can be Q upper bar or Q lower bar. We can write it also like this. And we will be labeling delta Q as positive, the difference between Q upper bar and Q lower bar. I think that the only one that works is the purple one. Yeah. Now, I'm going to write this, and you're going to read it for me, okay? Because we talk about stochastic elements, and we're talking about things that happen with some sort of probability. I've got an awful handwriting, so please, if you can understand what I write, please tell me, okay? Can you read this for me, please? I'm going to go very slowly today because this is the most important thing. Then what we will do in the next week, it will be changing names, changing variables, labeling things in a particular context. But if this is clear, application will be super clear. So I really want you to get this. Please read this for me. Guys, if you've done econometrics, you're most familiar with that. Just try. So the probability that the outcome Q is equal to Q upper bar, so that I'm getting the good outcome. What's this sign? Given that, conditional on E, the level of effort equal to 0, it's going to be labeled pi naught. Okay? The probability, oh sorry. The probability that the outcome variable, Q tilde, is equal to Q upper bar conditional on E equal to 1 is going to be equal to pi 1. So what we place in here is just to remind us the level of effort to which the probability of the outcome is associated. What can we say about pi 1 and pi naught? What can you think about? What's the relationship between the two? This is one of the most important things associated to the control theory. Please.
Would you say that the minimum and maximum?
Tell me more.
In the sense that if the level of effort is equal to 0, which is, I think, the least you can have on the effort scale, pi naught will be your...
So we can say, closer. So we can say that this is the probability of obtaining this outcome when I do not exert any effort, okay? Now, would you say that this is more or less likely to happen compared to this?
Less
This has to be less likely to happen. Okay? So to do again the example of the final exam, a midterm, whatever you want, is definitely more likely that you're going to get a very good grade if you exert an eye effort. Okay? Then of course there can be luck that can play a role, but this is called first stochastic dominance, and the probability of obtaining a high outcome under high effort must be higher than the one of obtaining the high outcome under low effort. Otherwise, there's no possible incentive that I can induce you to work with. Okay? Now, of course, you can have also the opposite. And so you can have the probability of obtaining the low level of effort under E equal to 0, and that, sorry, under E equal to 1, and that's going to be 1 minus pi naught. And the other way around. So you might still have the high outcome. You might still have the high outcome when you exert a low probability, a low effort, sorry, but this must be less likely to happen, okay? And so we will have 1 minus pi naught and 1 minus pi 1. Now, what we're missing here is the utility function, and I'll write it down here, of the principle. Now, in here, let me write it down and then we'll discuss that. So, because the outcome is a stochastic variable, the utility function of the principle will have a stochastic element, which is driven by the outcome. And in particular, it will be, because we said that we're going to set the reward schedule ex ante as a principle, I don't know what exactly outcome I'm gonna obtain, but I know that eventually it will be a weighted average of either the high outcome or the low outcome. Now, the S function is called like a satisfaction function. This is why the S, and it's a function of Q, whereas T is the transfer that the principal pays to the agent. And as you can see, now we have a sort of, as we said, a weighted average, because we don't know which one of the Q can eventually happen. What else do you notice about V, the utility function of the principle? I've used the V1, okay? Could I have used also the V note, right? Why I haven't done so? Try to think of what we've said about the probabilities. Try to think, these are conditional probabilities. Try to think has the of what we said about how the efforts affect this probability and eventually the outcome, and so make a connection between the two, and tell me why the utility function of the principle has to be always specified as multiplied using pi 1 rather than pi naught. as a principal, what would you like? What would be your preference? But that would be anyway, right? So you will get this here and here. But what's the difference between the two? Where do you think you will get the highest utility? If I work or I shirk? For you. If I work for you guys, what would you like me to do? Work or shirk? Work, right? So we can assume that the principal, because of what we said, the conditional probability, because we know that eventually is more likely to have Q upper bar if E is equal to 1, I would like, as a principal, always the agent to exert pi 1. We will work on this in the tutorial, so you will see the difference between the two. It can be shown that eventually this delta is the delta V is actually positive, and so as a principal you will be better off. But the intuition is this. Okay, the intuition behind the demonstration of the outcome is this, that as a principal you want your agents to work, to exert the high level of effort. And this is why you always maximize this sort of function. What else do you observe compared to what we said before? Look at the conflict of interests. Whatever enters the utility of the agent in a positive way enters here in a negative way, right? I have to pay, as a principal, the transfer. So it does impact my utility negatively. On the other hand, because we know of the connection between Q and effort, we know that if I get a higher Q, most likely the agent has exerted a high level of effort. So whatever enters the principal function with a plus is going to affect the agent in a negative way. And this is where the conflict of interest comes from. So this is something that we have discussed. Now you see exactly how does it work technically. Now, we have talked about a timeline. We talk about the bargaining power. And I said to you already that the only option that the agent may have is to reject or accept the contract, but not changing the terms. So let's see the timeline. How does it work? So at the very beginning, in t equal to 1, P, the principal, offers a contract, which can be T upper bar or T lower bar. So it is already decided. In T equal to 1, the agent accepts or rejects the contract. If he rejects, we're done. Okay? If he accepts the contract, immediately after, he exerts the level of effort, which can be 0 or 1. In the next moment, Q is realized and can be Q upper bar or Q lower bar. And in the last moment, the contract is executed. What does that mean? What does that mean? As a principal, what do I do here?
Break even. Break even.
What do you mean?
Like what I pay the agent, incentivizing them to put in a certain level of effort that
No.
maximizes my utility.
Wait. This is here. Okay? I'm telling you, ex ante, up front, what I'm going to pay you. see in a minute how does that work in terms of providing incentives. But here I've got two options, right? Once this is realized, I will have only one Q. Do you agree? It could be this or that, but it will be one. So here, what do I do? Yeah?
You pay for the performance outcome.
Exactly. I pay, thank you. I pay T, but I will pay one T only. One of these two. Depending on what? Depending on whatever Q has verified. Okay? So the contract is executed means I'm going to pay the one T, which is a function, as we said before, it's gone now, which is a function of the Q that I have, that the agent, my agent, has produced. Now, in order to understand what are the ways in which the principal can incentivize the agent to exert the highest level of effort, we have to consider two important elements, two important constraints. I'll write it down and then we read it, okay? I'll write it down both. This can also be labeled as this. So the one on top is called the participation constraint, and the one that I'm writing now is called the incentive compatibility constraint. Can you please read the first equation? What does it say? So this is a participation constraint or individual rationality constraints. In the books you can find it labeled in both ways, okay? I prefer participation constraint simply because it gives you a better idea of what does that mean. Please. What am I saying in this equation? Remember that it's a sentence, huh? Something that we can read. It has a meaning. Anyone wants to try? So U stands for utility. Is there anything that you cannot understand from my handwriting? And I won't blame you. This is psi. This is the utility. Then the probabilities. Yes.
Is it that the principal's always gonna like?
Hang on, sorry, I'll stop you. Whose utility are we talking about? This is U, okay? So U is for the agent, and V is for the principal. I haven't written down here, but it's like you always have it. Go on. Should be non-smaller. Okay? Very good. Very good and very close. The expected utility. Remember that here we have some probability, okay? So it's an expected utility. The expected utility that the agent will obtain, pi 1, conditional on exerting the I level of effort minus the cost of effort, so we can say this is the net expected utility, should be none smaller. Remember that if we have the inequality, in this case, specified like this means that it's none smaller than a U upper bar that we can quantify. Can be a constant, could be a reference point. I'll make an example. I want to hire one of you guys to come and do, to paint my house, and if you do a very good job, I'm going to offer you £100. And then you can say, well, look, for £100, I'm not even going to get out of my couch. So this is the £100. Okay? So is the minimum level of utility I have to provide you with in order to be willing to accept my offer. Remember where we are here. Accept or reject. This is the first and most important decision that the agent makes. Because if he rejects, we do not even go further. Okay? The contract is ended. I have to find somebody else. I have to continue my search. So the participation constraint, and this is why I liken to co-participation, is the constraint that, if satisfied, will allow the agent to participate, to accept my offer, and to come and work for me. Okay? This is the first decision. How about the second decision? Incentive compatibility constraint. Think about what we just said, and if you can look at that visually, the first part is exactly the same, right? What does change is only the second part. And on the right-hand side, rather than having a reference point, a number, a minimum level of utility that I have to satisfy, what do I have? Guys, what we just said. I have the utility, expected utility, that I earn as an agent when I do exert what? Zero effort, and in fact, there's no cost. Can you see that, right? So in here, we should have had -0. Okay? Can you tell me what does that mean? What's the implication of that? Yeah.
So the utility for the agent, if he works, should be greater than the utility for greater than the utility if he puts no effort in.
Exactly. So the idea or the rationale behind the incentive compatibility constraint is what I told you before. So as a principle, when I offer the rewards schedule, T upper bar and T lower bar, I have to make sure that the agent will find in his best interest to exert I effort. Why? Because the expected utility net of the cost of effort that I provide him with is actually none smaller than the one he gets by exerting no effort. And this is the most important thing. Only if you are able to do this, whether you can verify the action of the agent or not, it doesn't matter. Basically, you have removed the problem and inefficiencies associated to asymmetry information. Why? Because the guy will work. Whether you see him or not, it will work. It will exert the high level of effort. I'll make you an example. Think about the exams. If I say, for the midterm exam, if you just put your pen on the paper and you write your ID, you're going to get 70 or 75. What is this 75 in here? Where is it? Where is it? Tell me the letter or the part of the equation that is the 75. Yes? No. Right hand side, where?
Right hand side top equation.
This is what, guys, we're going to do in the tutorial, okay? Assign numbers to this equation. Because if you get this, then you can play with the model. Why is this the 75? Because no matter what you do, just before showing up and writing your name, which I assume all of you can do, you're going to get 75. Okay, so all of you will come and participate. Now, there will be some of you that will be happy with this. And so will decide not to exert any effort. But there will be some of you that actually will say, well, for just showing up, I get 75. If I do a little bit of effort, I might even get to 80. Okay? So you might get still a little bit of an incentive to exert effort. What if I say that just for you come and write down your name, you're going to get 90, 95. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm increasing right hand side. I'm increasing your insurance. You're going to get that anyway. Who's the one that's going to work for 8 weeks just to get 100? Tell me now. So, do you know what I mean? If I provide you with a lot of insurance, you will have no incentive to exert E equal to 1. On the other hand, if I provide you with too little insurance, there might be some of you that say, well, actually, the effort that you're going to ask me to do this task is so high that I don't want that. It's too much. And you will reject my contract. So, the reason why the principle face a maximization of utility constrained by these two constraints is because it has to find the right balance between insurance and incentives. The higher is the insurance provided to the agent, and the higher is the risk that you will not exert any effort. I'm happy either way. I'm happy with 85. I don't need to work. I'm happy with this. Great. On the other hand, if I provide as a principle too little insurance, it might be that the guy said, oh, actually, this task is too daunting, it requires a huge amount of effort. I'm not going to accept that. I'm walking out. So the entire setup of the contract theory framework revolves around finding the right measure for the principle between insurance and incentives. And this is basically, when we get to how do we do this, this is the intuition behind. How do we do this? By choosing these two values. So in the maximization program that we will set up it now, but we will do it next week. What the principle aims at is finding the optimal T upper bar and the optimal T lower bar that will at the same time satisfy both the constraint, which means that the agent is willing to accept and to exert the high level of effort. The only way in which the principal can do that, the only toolkit, the only element he has is these two values, is the reward schedule. T upper bar and T lower bar. This is the control variable, choice variable, whatever you want to call them, of the principal. What's the choice variable of the agent instead? What's the only thing? As we said, the agent cannot change that, cannot renegotiate those. But what is the only choice variable that he can use, that he can choose? Say it again?
Effort.
Effort, thank you very much. So the only thing that the agent instead can choose is how much do I want to work? 0 or 1. Okay? So our next step, if this is clear, it will be to maximize this function here, and we will learn via the tutorial next week why do we maximize V1 and not V note, subject to these two constraints. Now, what do you notice about these two constraints? Because now that we know why we're going to do this and what we're going to do, we have to understand the technicalities. How practically does it work, this maximization? What do you notice about the constraint? Are they different from any other constraint that you use? Think about the budget constraint, for example. What's the difference between a budget constraint that you might have used and this one? So when we were reading the equation, we said that whatever is on the left-hand side should be none smaller than the right-hand side, okay? Greater or equal, you read the none smaller. But in order to be able to use this equation and the other one to solve our maximization program, what do we need from this constraint? Yes? Sorry? More than set them equal to each other, we need them to be specified as an equality, not inequality. Okay? So we need the equal sign between here and there. Why, guys? Otherwise, you cannot use it as an equation, right? Do you agree with this? How do we label a constraint that is satisfied with the equality sign, equal sign? So, think about the utility function, and think about the, I don't know, the budget constraint here. Actually, let me do it. So I have this utility function in one variable, variable x, and I have this constraint x star equal to b. Okay? Now, the position of the constraint can be here, can be there, And as you can see, if the maximum of the function is kind of here, you can see that depending on the position where the constraint meets the function, we will have completely different outcomes. If the constraint is here, let's say x equal to a, what can we say about the constraint and the function? Is it relevant for my outcome, this constraint, or for the maximization of my utility or not? Why? Because the function reached the maximum before meeting the constraint. Okay? In this case instead, the constraint meets the function before the function peaks. Okay? Which means that the maximum is going to be determined by the constraint. In this case, we say that the constraint is binding. In this case, we say that the constraint is not binding. Think about you wanted to make, I don't know, want to go for a trip, and I say, well, you want to go to Paris, and I give you £10,000. Or, for example, you have to choose a destination, but you have to say in between the budget of £50. This is this case here, where basically the amount of money that you have will determine the choice of the destination. Why? Because with £50 you can't go everywhere. Okay? So your choice will be constrained by the amount of money you have. It's a conditional choice, constrained choice. In this case instead, you can choose any destination you want, because apparently your preference, going to Paris, is not affected by the budget constraint you have. Why? Because it's so big that doesn't bind. Okay? This is exactly the same game. Here, one variable. Here we have two variables that we will do next week. Okay? So we would like to find, first and foremost, whether these constraints are satisfied with the equality, they are binding, or they are not binding. Why? Remember that we need to find two unknowns. If we have two equations and two unknowns, we're done. We can solve our system, right? We can find the solution. If we need to find two unknowns, but we have only one constraint, which is binding, we are in trouble, or sort of trouble. We will see what case is that. So the most important thing, once we have specified our constraint, it will be to check whether they are binding or non-binding. If they are binding, they're going to be determining the solution. If they are non-binding, the decision from the principal will be taken no matter what the constraints are. Now, as you can see in the principal agent module, is like having the utility of somebody which limits the utility of somebody else. So before, in the maximization of utility with the budget constraint, you were maximizing your preference given a certain amount of money. In this case, the utility of the agent is the limit, is the constraint to the utility of the principal. And this is where the strategic game comes from. Is the utility, the preferences of the agent, they will eventually set a limit to what the principal can choose in terms of reward schedule. Why? Because either he cannot accept, or once he accepts it, he cannot exert the high level of effort. So this is the difference that you've seen compared to, for example, solving whatever constraint maximization with a budget constraint. I stop here. Any question? Next week we will find a solution for the reward schedule. It could be. Yes. Yes. Satisfaction. It's just a function that explains how much would you earn from that outcome. Okay. Psi. So this is a constant. This is a cost of effort. Okay, which is a constant. Yeah. 0 or psi, positive. You're welcome. Hi. Yeah. No problem. It's new for everyone.
Hi. I was just wondering if you could repeat what you were saying about the two equations, like the expected.
So yeah, so read it with me. So this is a utility function, right?
Yes.
But it's weighted by the probability. Do you see? Pi 1 and 1 minus pi 1. So it's an expected utility, right? Because the outcome is expected. It's not certain.
Yeah.
So this is the expected utility minus the cost of effort. So we can call it net expected utility because it's the net of the cost.
Okay. Yeah. And then I think you said something about like because I wrote down the expected utility that the agent will obtain
Conditional on exerting the eye level of effort because it's pi 1, which means that it's this pi. You can write it either like okay, and then as a shorten we say pi 1. And pi, so it's the
So that's the weight, it's conditional on.
exactly conditional on exerting the eye level of effort, because this is where the maximum effort comes from, right? So you want this that will be the highest utility for you, net of the cost, because otherwise you don't have the cost like here, should be none smaller than a reference utility you have in mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? As we said before, so for example, to get you out of your couch, you want £100. For less than that, I'm not even moving.
Yeah.
So this £100 will be your reference point.
Yes.
Reference utility. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good. Hi.
Sorry, I'm just having trouble understanding the graph.
This.
specifically there. Yeah.
So with this or with that? Both.
So I have a question on
Yeah.
x equals a. More specifically,
Yeah.
appreciating the x and y values. Am I right to understand that at x equals a,
Yeah.
there's almost
Is a
an
constant,
excess
right?
of effort exerted?
No.
No.
Forget about the effort.
Okay.
Okay? So here we're looking at, I just use this example with one variable because I think it's easier for you to understand the role of the constraint. So when you maximize a utility, one variable, you can have a unconstrained maximization right? In which case, you will choose, just according to your preference, which is the highest level of x, which is the x for which you will get the highest utility. Now, if you look at this, you have, let's assume you have a concave utility function. This will happen here, right?
Yeah.
Unconstrained. I ask you to take a trip, and you say, actually, I want to go to New York Fine, this is your preference, okay? And I'm telling you, what's your name?
Martin.
Martin. And I'm telling you, Martin, you have no budget, okay? Just choose whatever you want. Say I want to go to New York, fine. And I'm telling you, Martin, actually, let's put some budget, okay? So maximize your utility, and now the destination that you can pick must be equal to A, okay? So, okay, so A can be an amount of money, for example, okay? And I'm like, okay, so I wanted to go here, but it might be that actually I have to go here.
Yeah.
And that might be, I don't know, Warwick, for example, okay? A big choice. So why? Because it doesn't give you much money. So in this case, it will be the constraint that will determine your destination. Why? Because you cannot choose just depending on your preference. You have to match it with what the budget that I give you.
Right.
Okay?
And
But it might be that I give you, in this case, the constraint is binding because it meets the function before the function picking, and you can say to me, I would have gone to New York, but with the money that you gave me, I barely reached Warwick.
Yeah.
Okay? But it could be that I'm so generous and I give you this amount of money. And you can say, no, look, I still want to go to New York, even if you give me £10,000.
Right.
Why? Because this is still my preference.
Right. Okay.
Okay? So I don't care how much money you gave me. It's enough to get there, yes. So in this case, the constraint is non-binding.
Right.
Okay? It does not determine your final choice.
And then
It doesn't matter.
and then almost say I had a problem to solve for say this. I suppose the step one is to determine whether the constraint is binding. If not,
Exactly. So in a problem of one variable is very easy because it's either or.
yeah.
Okay? Because you have one equation in one variable. So it's either this the solution or that.
Right.
Right? Because you have one variable only. So you can play the game either or. So either the constraint is binding or the utility, I just maximize the utility function with no constraint. Here, as we will see next week, we have two variables because the variables are t upper bar and t lower bar. So first of all, we have two constraints. And if we're lucky enough and this one is binding, we have two equations, two control variables, we're done. But there might be instances, and we will see that, where this is not the case.
Right.
And this is where things become a little bit more complicated.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Better?
That's definitely.
But which one is binding again, sir?
You tell me, come.
Which one? remember
Binding
the-
means that it defines the solution. Okay? So in here, because the peak of the function is here, I would like to get there, but I can't. So this is binding. It constrains